First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm not Mark Evanier. He's doing other things, so they drafted me at the last minute to moderate this panel, which I'm delighted to do because I've been a fan of Sword and Sorcery and Robert E. Howard and Barbarians for over 50 years. I go to Howard Days every year in Cross Plains, Texas, which is a Robert E. Howard celebration. About 100 crazy Robert E. Howard fans show up every year. So I'm in the 100 of the craziest Howard fans. So I know a little bit about this stuff, not as much as Mark Evanier. But anyway, this panel is called The Shadow of Frazetta, and it's going to be Cary and maybe Tom, if we can find him. And if not, I can talk a little bit about him. Really, I thought what we'd do is kind of open up a discussion with both of them, or at least Cary, about the arc of their career, maybe how they ran into Frazetta and the impact that he's had. But really, I want to hear from Cary. I don't know him very well, how he got started and that sort of thing. Let me show a couple of things. I just pulled a couple pieces in case anybody isn't real familiar. This is three of Tom Grinberg's pieces, and he has some more at his table. He's got a very fluid, loose style. And we can come back to that in a minute if we're at the end and I need to talk about them a little bit. And then these are just three pieces of Cary's, of basically Conan's that he did in the Dark Horse Conan. But I just wanted people to get a little bit of a picture in case they weren't immediately familiar. But anyway, this is Cary Nord. We'll start with Cary, who's gracious to be here. And the other thing I wanted to say, this is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to every father who's out there. And thank you to every family that allowed their father to come here to enjoy HeroesCon. So that's a big deal. But anyway, Cary, could you start out by telling, I know you're from Canada, and so and I guess you've lived in Canada all your life, what was the early part of your life, and how did you discover comic books and comic art?
Early part of my life. Actually, never, I was interested in comics as a kid, but my parents never fork out the money for them. So I didn't, until I got like my first paper route or something, I didn't buy comics until I was about 13 or 14. And that was kind of it for me. I figured out a year later you could do this for a living. I was like, that's what I want to do. And by the time I was 19, I broke in. So I've been doing it ever since.
Did you start drawing when you were a kid? As soon as you saw comics, did you start imitating people?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Before that, I used to draw like sports guys and animals and stuff. And
so you were drawing before you discovered comics?
Yeah, I was always drawing. Yeah, that was something I was always into, but never like the figure and that kind of thing. Not comic books. I started that when I was about 13.
Okay. Yeah. And what were the comic books that you read at first that impacted you? Were they Marvels? Were they DC?
Yeah, I was X-Men.
X-Men.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I couldn't. That was there was 3 or 4 X-Men books at the time, X books or whatever. So I had to get just those ones. So I didn't really explore much the rest of the comic universe.
Yeah. And who were the artists on those on those books that you were watching?
Well, Mark Silvestri was my first major influence.
Wow.
He was doing X-Men at the time in the 80s there, and that was he's the guy that made me want to do comics.
Wow. Wow, that's cool. And did you start looking backward? Did you start looking at Neil Adams and Jack Kirby and some of the older guys, or was that much later?
I don't even, still to this day, I don't really know too much about either of those guys' body work. I'm aware of them, but they weren't really influenced. I got into, basically it was X-Men and Mark Silvestri and all those Jim Lees and that whole era of X-Men. All those guys were my artistic influence, and then somehow I discovered Frazetta was my next major influence.
And where did you run into him? How did you run into Frazetta?
I don't even remember. I think I bought it was a creepy anthology or something like that, and they had Frazetta's 10-page werewolf story, and that's the first time I'd ever seen Frazetta, and it was just I need more.
Yeah.
This is before the internet too, so it was tough to track down. You had to go figure out that these books that he had out or even existed. You didn't even know, right?
Right,
You just, all
right.
I have is a name and I want more. That's all I had. So.
Were you able to track down any of the paperbacks or anything like that, or was
No.
it mostly the Warren creepy type stuff?
I mean, yeah, I got a few of those, like, yeah, those creepy whatever, like, you know, you'd find like a reprint or something. But it was I forget what the books are called now, but there's like 4 or 5 volumes of those, was it Fantagraphics or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that? You know what I'm talking about?
Fantagraphics. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was like, you know, I found one of those at some point in a used bookstore, and then I realized there's more. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now I have a direction. So yeah, it took about, you know, I'd say by the time I was like, 19 or so, I had a decent collection of Frazetta's, you know, prints and stuff. So.
And what did you do? Did you go to an art school? Did you get any formal training? Was it you're training yourself?
I did go into art college in Calgary, and it wasn't, they were not very comics friendly, so basically I was just flunking myself, you know, like, they want me to, like, you know, do all these, like, interesting, you know, fine arts type things. I'm just, like, drawing, you know, Captain America or something, and, you know, and they're just like, you can't do that. And I'm like, watch me. And then I basically flunked out.
Wow. How long were you in art school?
Well, I went twice the same year, because the first year I literally flunked out, and then the next year I'm like, all right, I got to get through this, I guess. So I started, you know, conforming, but then I got a job, and I was like, see ya, and that was that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Was it like they wanted you to do still lifes or
No, I wish. No, it was like it was very heavily, like, very abstract and, you know, modern art kind of thing, and I just didn't care about that. I wanted skills, right?
Right. Right.
And they weren't offering much in the skill department for that era in that college. So yeah, you just kind of, the best thing about art college for me was like meeting other, like, people that were interested in comics.
Right.
And they, like, you know, that's the first time, like, I met some guy that was like submitting to Marvel at the time, and like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that, you know, like, so that was my education or my introduction into that whole comic book world, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. That's really cool. And what happened next then? How did you start developing a portfolio to be able to show, or did you even know you had to do that to be able to?
Well, that's another thing. Yeah, these guys in art college were, they'd show you the guidelines. So you'd have to write to Marvel, and they'd send back, the guideline submission. And so I did that, and it was like you had to do like 6 pages of, you know, sequential art. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do that. And that was kind of, then you mail it off and see what happens.
Were you able to go to any comic book conventions? Were there any around you, or was that not an option because they just weren't around?
No, there weren't. I remember one time, like, it'd be a comic convention, I guess, but it was literally for vendors, right? So
Yeah.
just, you know, all these comic books you could buy. And one time they had McFarlane's. He lived in Calgary for a while, or his dad was in Calgary or something, so he'd come back every once in a while. And I remember he came once, and that was like a big deal. That was like when he was doing Spider-Man. And that's the only real comic book artist I'd ever, you know, I don't even know if I met him. I think I just saw him there. And,
Okay, so
Yeah.
you didn't get to show him your portfolio or anything like
No,
that?
I
You
think
just saw him as that's a comic book artist?
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
I think I was even too young to even have had a portfolio at that point.
Yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
know, I was probably like 16 or something. So I was just like, you know, but there's a guy doing what I want to do, so that was
Yeah.
encouragement enough.
Were your parents or your brothers or sisters or family in art in any way, or was it totally foreign? Was it?
No, my dad had gone to that same art college, you know, before me, and he dropped out too after 3 years, so runs in the family, I guess. But yeah, he was always like, he was actually my first, you know, he was always teaching me how to do, you know, art, right?
Yeah.
So just little things, like not a formal
Uh-huh.
kind of thing, but he just like, you know, why don't you try this? And both my parents were, they were musicians, so they'd, you know, go out and play. This is before DJs too, so they'd go out and like do, you know, play in like people's weddings and,
Yeah.
you know, graduations and stuff. That was like their kind of gig.
Wow. What did they play? Like, were they guitar, piano?
Yeah, it was like they were just a duo. So that my mom played the bass and dad played the guitar, and they both sing, and that was their act.
Wow. And did any brothers or sisters do anything artistic?
My sister's got that sort of inclination, but she's like she went into hairdressing, and then you just kind of started having kids, and that was that.
Yeah, yeah. But were they supportive when you said,
Yeah.
I think I want to be an artist? I wanna
Absolutely,
draw."
yeah. They never once told me like, you should get a real job or anything like that. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're up to 19 or something now, or 20. So how did you progress then? How did you move forward in your career?
Well, I got into comics when I was 19. Just like little 10-page stories.
You submitted your portfolio.
Yeah,
and said, okay, we'll send you some stuff.
Yeah. And this was like the time too. It was like when Image was blowing up and comics were huge. So they were giving out jobs like candy, which is kind of a stroke of luck for me, because I don't think I was like ready. But here you are all of a sudden, like I've hardly even drawn any sequential art, and then I get handed like Daredevil or something in a series, and like way in over my head.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, he's MIA.
Okay. We'll wing it. We'll wing it. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because normally when artists start out, they start doing like a splash page or like one figure. And how did you make the switch into storytelling? Did they coach you a little bit or anything like that, or did you just have to study other people?
So my first gig ever was like a 10-pager with DC. It was like they had a showcase book, and for basically a new talent. And the editor, I actually owe my career to him, probably because I was in art college, and I'm like, I got this thing, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I was doing this, and then doing college on the side, during the day. So I'd come home and then draw all day for DC. And this guy, he basically whipped me into shape. He's like, this is not good enough, redo it. So I had to redo every single page 3 times.
Wow.
And he'd have their art director, and for some reason it was worth it to him to do that. And I thought, like, that's it for my career. Like, everybody, they hate me. But I learned so much from that one particular editor, and he like took the time to work with me. He didn't give me a job again after that. He got me in enough of a good shape that I could take my work for him and then go to Marvel, which is how I got into Marvel after. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Neil Posner.
Neil Posner.
Who passed away, years ago. But he was like.
Did you ever get to meet him?
No, I never did. No, we just talk on the phone.
Wow.
But, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How someone can have an impact on your life like that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, and I don't even know why he would have bothered. To be honest, I guess he saw some potential in there and felt like it was worth pushing. But yeah, it was like if you look at, I have like the photocopies back in the day of like my work with before him and then my work after him. It's like a different person. Like
wow.
He wouldn't let me get away with anything. It's like, no, you gotta fix all this and you gotta fix all that. It's like I hated it. It was the worst.
Yeah.
But I learned a ton. So that was my my official training, I think.
Wow. And how long did that go on? For 6 months or 8 months?
I did 3 10-page stories with him, and I think it should have been like 3 months, but it wound up taking like probably 5 or 6 or something.
Yeah. And then what happened? You submitted to Marvel and got a job at Marvel then?
Yeah, basically. I took that whole like DC package and sent it to Marvel, and Marvel, like they basically offered me like Daredevil right away, which was crazy. I mean, I did a little few 8-page stories for them, and then they're like, "How do you feel about doing Daredevil?" I'm like, I was freaking out, but like, I'm not. Yeah. I didn't feel I was ready, but what are you gonna do, right?
Right.
Jumped in.
And did someone help you there at Marvel a little bit when you first started going editorially?
Yeah, I had another editor named James Felder at the time, and it's the same thing. Like, for some reason, he saw potential, and he was like just an associate editor, so he was just he didn't even have his own book yet, but he was like really campaigning for me, and I think the actual editor, like the group editor or whatever it was, hated my stuff, and he wouldn't let her fire me. So I was like, that was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know. I got lucky a few times. So I had a couple guys that just believed in me,
Right.
and pushed me, and that was.
And would he coach you a little bit in the storytelling?
Not really. I mean, like at that point, I kind of like I'm not kidding. I learned a ton at DC. Like those 30 pages I did for them was just like a whole. It was like school,
Right. Like a year of art.
Yeah, it was just crazy. So I feel like everyone always liked my storytelling. It was just like weaknesses were like I didn't know how to draw things from certain angles or whatever.
Right.
Because I hadn't,
Right.
So I'm learning that stuff sort of on the job. But storytelling wise, I always had a pretty natural instinct for that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And then after Daredevil, did you go to Punisher?
No, I never actually did any Punisher.
Oh, I thought you did Punisher.
No, I know I got the Punisher poster at my booth.
Yeah,
and everything,
yeah,
but
yeah.
no, I never. It was just a commission. Yeah.
So what did you do after Daredevil?
Daredevil. I think they just gave me like a bunch of kind of fill-in issues here and there, and then I got Mutant X.
Uh-huh.
Was my next big run,
And that must have been exciting.
Yeah.
To go into the X.
Yeah, definitely to go into the X world. Yeah, I got to draw some. It was like sort of an alternate universe. I don't know if anyone's read Mutant X, but it was like it wasn't like taking place in the regular timeline.
Yeah.
So I did get to draw like all these X-Men, but they were all like variations and other dimensional X-Men. So, and I got to draw Spider-Man once, but he had like the 8 arms going on and stuff. So it wasn't quite Spider-Man, but.
And then, what happened after that? How did your career progress?
After that, so Mutant X kind of ended. So yeah, like Daredevil was like 95, about a year I did Daredevil, and then I floated around for a couple years before I got Mutant X, and then after Mutant X, I think I was like, that book just got canceled, or I quit, I can't remember. And then I was sort of floating around, not really, didn't have a home. I was doing a little bit of DC work. And then I sent a submission to Dark Horse at the time, and they were just about to launch. They had the Conan property, but they didn't have like an artist yet. And yeah, somehow that all worked out.
So they said, yeah, we're going to give you a shot.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, like, there was a tryout process, so
Okay.
they're like, do a tryout, basically, and so there's a lot of competition for it, and there's like a 6-month deliberation period, too, so I did the tryout, and they're like, it's great, and then for 6 months, I waited and waited and waited.
Wow.
And I didn't want to take
I
on,
didn't know that.
any other gigs either, because, I don't want to get locked down if I
Right,
want to keep this
right.
job, but they never kind of had this, they didn't have a deadline or time to
Yeah,
start. They're just sort
yeah.
of like, we're thinking about it for 6 months. So that was a bit hellish. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like so uncertain. You're just waiting.
Do you know who you were up against? Do you know the other guys that were?
No, actually, I don't
You
know.
don't?
Yeah, he told me there's about 30 guys that were all like had done a tryout, and they were like considering about maybe 10.
Wow.
So there's a lot of deliberation, and we're going through the Conan people and Dark Horse people, and so yeah, it was like some stiff competition, I think.
Yeah. And how did you support yourself when you were not getting much work or?
Oh, good question. I don't even remember. I think I was just like, I was like actually, 30-year-old living at home. I went back
so
to my
you
parents.
lived at home,
Yeah.
and the parents supported you and said,
Yeah, basically,
well,
I just like, I know I must have made some money. I think they were throwing me, some like Dark Horse work in general. Like,
Yeah.
Here's a little like 8-pager or 10-pager. So you get something coming in. But
Yeah,
it was,
But it helped living at home, so you didn't have living expenses.
yeah, I didn't have to
quite
worry
so
about
much.
rent for,
Yeah.
it was about those 6 months, yeah.
Yeah.
Just waiting. It was,
And then what was it like when they said you're doing Conan?
oh man, that was like my dream project. Like I was, a huge Frazetta fan and always been a Conan fan, and then I get the gig, and it's like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. Had you read any of the old Marvels? Or were you real familiar with those, or were they kind of just in the background a little bit, or?
I think I used to get the Savage Sword, but they were, more expensive back.
Yeah,
It was like,
yeah.
I was a kid, so I was like, I could
you couldn't
I
get
could buy
every
like
single
one
one
Savage
of them.
Sword or like 5 X-Men comics or something,
Yeah,
right? So I'd
yeah.
get every once in a while you get like these Conan books. I always liked them, and I actually used to remember the King Conan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
With that was a Silvestri book. So
Yeah.
I got into that, and then yeah, just like obviously being a Frazetta fan, so Conan was sort of, I don't know why I even, because I never read I read the Savage Swords, a few of them, and I think I just liked the whole barbarian
Right,
thing.
right.
But I never actually read the Howard novels or anything. So, you know, I saw the movies, I guess. and that
Yeah,
was-
you saw the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah.
But you never read, so you never did read the original, or did you eventually get
I
to
did,
that?
yeah. When we were doing actually the Conan books,
Yeah,
the way the Dark Horse had it set up was you do like they do basically 6 issues for every Howard story.
yeah,
So like Frost Giant's Daughter, we did the adaptation, and then there'd be like 5 more issues about sort of what led up to that, and then how you get into the next arc,
Right,
which was like God in
right.
a Bowl or something. So you kind of tell the story in between the Howard stories.
right, right.
So, but yeah, at that time I had actually started reading the novel.
The novel, the short stories
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, yeah. And what did you think when you read Robert E. Howard?
I mean, it was great, you know. Yeah, I was like,
A lot of people, I mean, I think a lot of the Howard people think that he's a very visual writer. Like you kind of project his stories on the movie screen in your head. Like you can see what he's writing about, maybe more so than other authors. I don't know if you felt that way or not.
you know, I don't even think I have a feeling on that. Like, I read them, and then it
You'd
was
get
just
a
so
script.
fast paced. Yeah,
you'd get a script.
So I
that
was like speed reading them. I wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
able
yeah.
to really do it
Enjoy
for
them,
enjoyment. You know,
yeah.
I'm like reading them really fast, and then I get a script the next day, and then you know,
and then
now
you'd
that's
start,
your life. You know, so
start
you're just doing
plotting
that.
at like breaking down
Yeah,
things and,
yeah.
and was it a detailed script or did you have a lot of latitude?
That was pretty detailed.
Pretty detailed.
Yeah.
It was a Marvel method. It was more, here's this page.
Yeah,
So
it was like, yeah, I mean, Kirk Busiek was a, you know, great writer.
Great
so
writer.
He made it really easy. But yeah, it was like, everything was spelled out. Yeah, the freedom I had was in like costuming and, you know, how I want to make the world. Like, basically
Right.
whatever I came up with, they were like, yeah, looks great.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So they didn't micromanage how you drew the world, the
Yeah.
environment, or even his clothing that much.
No, they were just always, yeah, they just liked, I guess, the vision, you know? So
Yeah,
like, keep
yeah.
doing that thing that you're
Yeah.
doing. And,
No,
yeah.
I thought it was wonderful and amazing and just a fantastic adaptation of the Howard material. I mean, it really captured the essence of Robert E. Howard.
Yeah, and I think we spent, that was the thing too. So that 6 months that I had waiting, I was also, you know, I kind of recognized that maybe I can give myself a little push. So I was like doing lots of designs and stuff
Yeah,
of, you
yeah.
know, the Conan world and, you know, passing it around to Dark Horse to help them sort of,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and they really love that stuff too. So I actually had, that was my, you know, I had 6 months to sit down and think about Conan
Right.
and, you know, the design and how it's gonna look and, you know.
Yeah. Did you go back to any of the Barry Windsor Smith stuff? or-
Yeah.
So you did. You looked at that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure,
and,
yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Did once you started doing it, was it all consuming? I mean, was it a lot of work?
Yeah, I mean, like, with comics, I mean, it's still all consuming. Like,
Yeah.
once you start a project, that's just like your life for the next however long that project lasts.
Right.
For me, anyway, like, I don't have that separation of, like, it's just, like, go until it's done, you know?
Right. And there was an aspect in there where they didn't you weren't inked for a while or they did.
Never, yeah.
Yeah, and what was that about? Was that a decision that it would look good that way or?
Yeah, so basically, it's gonna sound horrible, but I always hated how my work looked when someone else inked it, right? And I couldn't ink myself, 'cause I didn't have that skill. So basically, I was just like, but I get like, you know, my photocopies of my work, and I'm like, why don't we just, you know, do that off the pencils and color it in, and it looks great.
Yeah.
And my editor thought that was a horrible idea. But luckily, we had Dave Stewart, who is like master, you know, colorist, and he, I think because they wanted to have an inker on that. I didn't, so I was like saying, I don't want an inker. I just like, let's do pencils. I think maybe a couple guys were doing that at the time, but it wasn't really a big thing.
Right, right.
And then Dave got a hold of the samples, and because we didn't have an inker, but they're trying to lock down the coloring, so he just happened to like color over the pencils, and it looked great. And
it did.
That was enough to sell the whole idea.
Wow.
So
wow.
yeah, we got to just go straight from pencils to digital painting. So.
That's fantastic. And did you start to get a lot of recognition? Did people start?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I didn't really realize. I mean, I was out in Calgary, and you know, I didn't really. I knew my editor. I didn't know. Like Calgary is so isolated from the art comics community, especially.
Right.
So I was out there. Basically, I talked to my editor, and I didn't really like follow. Like the Wizard Worlds and all that.
Right. You still weren't going to conventions yet?
I'd go to a few, like maybe one or two. But yeah, after that, like people, there's a big difference. Like, you know, I was doing a convention, and you know, I'd get like 10 people coming up, like, nice work in Daredevil, and then
right.
all of a sudden Conan hit, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
For a while there, and it's like, oh, maybe maybe people like this.
Right.
But yeah, you had no idea. Like, there's no. I think that was kind of like when the forums and stuff were just starting online, you know. So you get.
Right.
I think soon after Conan, you could like go online and kind of see what people said.
Yeah.
But it's like a totally different world now, you know.
Right. It changed the feedback loop.
Yeah, for sure.
It changed the feedback loop. And by that time, had you run into the Frazetta, the paperback covers? There were like 12 paperbacks that Lancer did, and then they became Ace books, and they're iconic covers. And did you run into those? Had you run into them by that time? Or?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like not the actual paperbacks.
But you saw the image.
Well, I'd have the collection. At that point, I had all the Frazetta.
Okay.
I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely familiar with his Conan work.
Yeah. And was that intimidating to look at what Frazetta did and said, I've got to take this legacy and move it on? Or did you not think about it?
I didn't think about it. I mean, like, no, I was like, for some reason I never thought to compare myself to Frazetta. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even, you know, it's like.
Right.
So I'm just like always, I never really worried about it. Like, that was the interesting thing. I'm more worried now what people think than I ever was in my early career. So I didn't worry about it. I just did what I did, and that was that. You know?
Right. Yeah, I've thought about the title of this is In the Shadow of Frazetta, and it's almost insulting in a way, not because, Cary and Tom, and there are about maybe 6 other artists that are really fantastic sword and sorcery or adventure artists and in their own right. And, I thought even back in the day, was Wally Wood intimidated by Frazetta? Was Al Williamson intimidated by Frazetta? I think they probably really admired him. They probably recognized that he was just this absolute genius, but they were doing their own thing. They were great artists in their own right. And I wanted to ask Tom and you both, I think my suspicion is you guys just do your work and you enjoy it, and Frazetta's Frazetta. I mean, he's nobody's trying to imitate him now. I don't think you can. Had you seen the Boris work and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah.
And again, he's his own thing.
Yeah.
Am I right? I mean, they're just like their own thing, and you admire it, but you've got to earn a paycheck. You've got to do a job. And
yeah, I think that's what takes over. That's the interesting thing with comics is, like, for me anyways, like, you don't have time to worry too much about anything. I mean, you definitely care, but you also have to get the job done.
Right.
So, you can't really fuss about it too much.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think Frazetta was also before my time. So it was like, he was like, when he was like, doing those, I wasn't even born yet. The Conan cover. So it was never like he was my peer. So I didn't have that. He was always like this thing to aspire to, like on Norman Rockwell or something too, right? Like, he was just like, this was like the example.
They're dead,
what you
their
can
history,
so I didn't have that same sense, like, I think I'd be more intimidated by, like, say, like an Adam Kubert or something, who was, like, doing, comics when I was doing comics, and that was, like, one day, I got to be as good as him.
Can I compare with this guy? I may be going up for another job against this guy.
Yeah, so that had more of an impact than, or sorry, what was the word we used? Like, I felt more like intimidated by him.
Intimidation, yeah.
By my peers, you know, like those guys are like, we're on the shelves together at the same time, and those are the guys that are like the big guys
Yeah.
getting the big jobs, and like, I'm like, okay, I gotta be as good as this, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Frazetta was more like my spirit guide in a way, you know, like
Right.
sort of just like, you know, it's like, all right, I need to get better, so I just open a Frazetta book and then absorb as much as I can, and
Right.
then, you know,
Right.
I'll show that Adam Gilbert guy, you know.
And even Frazetta, when he was alive, he had a stroke, and he was never quite the same after the stroke. I think he drew with his left hand, but you know, he had to deal with that, and Frazetta wasn't Frazetta anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He dealt with what he had.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, I'm going to go off just for a second on those covers, and he started out with ace paperbacks of Edgar Rice Burroughs books, and I think Roy G. Krinkle got him the job. Roy was doing some of the covers, and he was having trouble getting the deadlines done, so he said, let's get Frank Frazetta in, and that got him the ace covers, that then got him the Lancer covers that really, you know, made him skyrocket. I mean, the originals of those covers now sell for millions of dollars. But that really launched Frank Frazetta. He was always brilliant, but that brought him to the public. And then everybody wanted a Frank Frazetta cover for their paperback book. I think your run on, you know, there's Barry Windsor Smith, and there's Buscema, and then there's you. I mean, I thought you really, and you were an evolution of that tradition. I thought it was you know, you were a modern version, and it was really amazing and beautiful and powerful, and you know, I think it's incredible. What happened after the Dark Horse run? How did that end? And I mean, every run ends, and
Yeah. I was just kind of burnt out. I was 4 years, you know, doing semi-monthly, almost monthly work. I was doing like 8 or 9 books a year, which is, you know, quite a bit. And yeah, I finally just, I think Kurt had already left.
Right.
He quit like a few issues, well, maybe a year or so earlier than I did. And then I was just burnt out. I was just like, I needed a break. And do something else. You know, I couldn't draw. I think I was like coming to a point where I couldn't even. I'd kind of done everything I could do with the character, or everything I'd bring. Like nothing was new. It was starting to get stale for me. You know?
Right.
So I sort of felt like I should. That was a good time to step away. You know.
And what did you go to?
I went into Marvel and just started doing little like miniseries here and there, and kind of just floated around for a while.
Right.
Until the Valiant thing, I did X-Men War, launched, like the Valiant company launched in 2012, I think. So we were doing X-Men War, and that was like my life for the next 3 or 4 years.
Right. And are you doing some of the Modiphius, the role-playing game, some artwork for that too?
No.
You haven't. Tom's probably doing that. Some of the Howard guys, Jeff Shanks and a few others, started this role-playing game that took off. I don't do it. I don't play it, but it went crazy. And there's artwork for that.
Oh yeah.
I think Tom has done some of it. But anyway, why don't we open it up for questions? We've been talking a lot up here. Does anybody have any questions? And I have a few questions if you don't, but go ahead.
One thing I thought about the double-edged sword of the internet in terms of access and inspiration for feedback, because kind of growing up in a similar situation, very isolated area, no internet, I could get my hands on like one of Burroughs paperback like every 6 months or something, and it was difficult to imagine some people was all having these different pieces of it. So there were parts of that that could drive their imagination because you're kind of on your own. But now that we're in an age where you can see anything you want with the Google search, and people can tell you exactly what they think of you.
Yeah.
Kind of contrast the pros and cons of your experience of those two.
The 2 different worlds.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, it used to be really hard to follow an artist. Like, you had to really work at it. You know, it was like collecting records or something. You know, you had to go in to shops basically every week, and you'd search those bins, and like you'd find something that just came in, and you know, it took you years to build up a collection of people's work. And now you can just, yeah, like you said, it's like immediate. You can like, get a sense of what an artist's all about in like 10 minutes. The pros and cons, like, I mean, it's way easier now, so you have access to way more art. I think I don't know if there's a con to that, but it was more, like back in the day, you just felt like you earned everything, you know what I mean? Like all your collections, like, and if you found like a great artist, you'd show your buddies and, check out this guy I just found, and like, it was an amazing thing, like I've never seen this before, I've never heard of this before. So it was a little more exciting that way, I guess, like, but as far as like career goes, I don't know, like I definitely prefer having the internet, I used to have to go, like I used to have so many books. I'd always go to used bookstores just to buy like reference material, that I may need or may not need, like you go in there, it's like, here's a book on sailboats that I've still never had a use for, but I've got it in my like collection, and that stopped basically once Google started, I never had to buy another used book a coffee table book on sailboats or like trains or something, things that you think would be useful. So I prefer Googling it for sure. And as far as the feedback, yeah, I don't go online and look for my reviews or anything anymore like I used to, and it was upsetting. You go there and like people are they hate you, or even when I was doing Conan, it was like the only feedback you'd ever get was online was always mostly negative, or there's a lot of negative, So it was like kind of damaging to your self-esteem, So now I don't even bother. I just like do what I do, and if people hate it, they hate it, and that's that.
There was a great sense of discovery before the internet when you would find a new paperback book that would hit the shelf or hit the drugstore. And I remember the Conan books, the Lancers came out kind of one at a time. So you'd get Conan the Adventurer and Conan the Conqueror, and then there'd be you didn't even know how many were going to come out, but they would just pop up there, and there was no real forewarning. So that was kind of, the discovery of that was a lot of fun. Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions? Go ahead.
So, first off, your Conan books are the shit.
Oh, thank you.
They're awesome. Like you were talking about the editor that chewed you up a little bit in the beginning. Like, what kind of stuff was that all about?
Say that again?
So you said there was an editor that you would have to do like 3 different renditions of.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff would you have to change?
It was, honestly, I was just like not good at, like all the things, like I could draw like, an action shot or something, but it would be things like, I'd never drawn the back of a guy's head, that panel when you're like, 2 people are talking, you have to draw like that view. And he's like, this is horrible, like this is not what that looks like. So he'd have an art director trace over it, and he's like, do it like this guy, So it wouldn't be like literally every page I'd have to redraw, like he'd just make me like fix up, panels over and over, whatever I wasn't getting right. And it'd be like things where, if I'm sitting here drawing like a room like this or something, for instance, I'd be lazy on like getting the chairs right and stuff. I just sort of like sketch it in. He's like, that's not good enough. You gotta like get the rulers out and make them all exact and use perspective. And it was frustrating because it's like I always you just want to draw the fun stuff, right? So the actual work in comics is doing all the stuff that's you wouldn't think. It's not the glamour stuff. It's like a little background thing that no one's even gonna notice, but it's correct, and it looks proper and tells a story, right? So it's stuff like that, just like very basic sort of like getting things correct.
Any other questions? I just want to say one thing. We may wrap up a little early because this was supposed to be 2 people, and I don't want to badger Cary to death for an hour because it's not 1 hour on him. But Tom is probably doing commissions, I'd imagine. There's an issue of Comic Book Creator, and if you go by the Tomorrow's booth, you can get it. It's the Frazetta Forever, but it has a long 8-page interview of Tom Grinberg. And if you don't know, he did the cover. If you don't know him, it's worth getting familiar with him. He's another one of the people like Cary, Gary Gianni, Greg Manchus. I mean, there are a few that are really the outstanding adventure sword and sorcery artists of our time, and he's one of them. And this style, we were talking about it, he's been drawing comics since the 80s. He was in Neil Adams' studio, Continuity. I think he was there briefly and had a parting of ways. But he had, his early comic book style for Marvel was a Neil Adams style. And then somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s, he developed this very fluid, heroic style that's reminiscent of, but not imitative of, Frazetta. He did a 5-year series of Tarzan e-strips that were like Sunday e-strips that are beautiful. I saw him on Facebook and I thought he was in a newspaper that had limited run, but it was only by subscription. It didn't do well. He had to sell off the originals to make any money. But he's a great artist, and I wish he'd been here because I think he deserves a little bit more notoriety. But anyway, Tom is at booth 802, and you're at what, 1908? Let me take a look here.
That's about right.
I think it's 1908. And your studio is Essential Sequential with Jason Schachter, so you can get commissions. It's a great stable of people, and Dan Panosian's in it, right? God, he's fantastic. If you want to see a great Conan, he does an amazing Conan too. But so anyway, visit him, visit Tom. I hope he's down there drawing away. And we'll end a little bit early unless anybody has questions. And I want to thank Cary for shouldering the whole thing today. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.